Oh, you didn't get it at all? You should talk to Oh, I'm sorry. That's not the way it should happen. I don't blame you.
Closest person, they can't get it to me. Come on.
So have you,
First time I think that's happened. But pretty much know what's covered. Hey, how you doing? How have you been? Good.
I can't always stop. Well, I mean, you get my point.
So here we are. I see one publication I got in the mail, you and Don Ness highlighted.
You were?
Yeah, about your jobs that you have today.
Oh, interesting. I like to see that. Don and I are over the hill. What the heck? What was it?
I think it's a supplement to maybe the Minnesota magazine or one of those I get in the mail. And
Oh, yeah, I did an interview way back. Whoop, I'm looking
you're
forward
sitting
to
in a
it.
funky chair.
Okay, that was in my
How are you,
funky
sir?
office.
Good.
So do we have the representative of Olmsted County? Is he still on this board?
Yeah, but he seems to be traveling all over the world.
You're gonna have to get his attention. Yeah, we'll put it, I tell you. Do you drink coffee?
Yeah, not now, thanks.
Put it there, and then you and I can.
Good morning. Let's call to order the meeting of the Destination Medical Center Board. I'm R.T. Ryback. I am stepping in for Tina Smith, who is unavailable this morning. Why don't we start by calling the roll?
Mr. Chair, do you want me to?
Yes, I would like you to,
All right,
yeah.
Mayor Brady,
Here.
Mr. Doherty,
Here.
Mr. Campbell,
Here.
Councilmember Hickey.
Here.
And is Susan on Skype?
She is.
Susan Marconi.
Susan, we see you. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning from my office.
Okay. Okay. Okay, good. All right, so why don't we move to the second action here is to approve the minutes of the April 27th meeting. We'll see in-
Second?
All in favor, say, any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Okay, let's move to the public comment period. We want to remind folks, as we do each time, that we're very happy you're here. We also want to make sure you do your best to keep it in 2 minutes so we can make sure everybody can speak and we can get our work done. And of course, your first and last name. So public comment is open. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name's Tanya Reagan. I have won several awards for historical preservation and rehabilitation, and I wanted to come and speak to you all today because I am really concerned about the preservation efforts within our city. I've sat in several of these DMC meetings and some of the public meetings recently, and I'm so excited and optimistic and incredibly impressed in what I see happening in Rochester. I was born and raised in Rochester. I sat through one of the presentations recently for Heart of the City where it talked about bringing the old and the new together and merging our old city with our history with the new. But there are so many buildings that have been torn down and that are in the docket of being torn down, and buildings that sit within the DMC district. In particular, is the Travelers Hotel. You know, the Travelers Hotel is about to have a 100-year birthday. It has an incredible amount of history within the city with the hospitality industry being very unique and special of its kind for this area of the country. And, you know, the Travelers Hotel could be an excellent opportunity to bring affordable housing to our downtown within the DMC to service those that live and work in at the Mayo, in the hotels, in the hospitality industry, and that serve our visitors to our city. So, you know, I think it's very, very important as we talk through some of these wonderful projects that we are very, very conscious of preservation and rehabilitating these old buildings to merge with the new. As you know, across the country, in these urban cities, you're seeing a revival in some of these downtown cities with young people moving back because of the character and because of the history, and they enjoy seeing the architecture and they enjoy seeing the old with the new. So I guess I'm here speaking today because more than anything, I want to make sure that, again, that we're very conscious, but also we're very public aware and that we're very transparent and very accountable, that as we move forward with these projects, that we are making every effort with working with the national institutions, the state organizations, and with the registry to ensure that we are taking care of our history because it's irreplaceable. Thank you.
Very much. Appreciate that. Any other public comments? Welcome. Please give us your name and remember the 2-minute limit.
2 minutes. I was thinking it was 4. Well, I typed it up anyway. Paula Harden. Sorry, it was a half a mile from the parking. No
We get it.
handicap parking. I'm asking a designated DMZ zone change. Rochester needs a new public library building. The existing building is over 20 years old, was compromised in design from the outset by reduced funds that had been approved by residents to build a 3-story library, and we ended up with 2. To even consider construction for expansion while remaining open, only to end up with a building that may have lipstick on it, but it will still be a pig, and non-ADA compliant is the height of absurdity. There will be no parking available during construction or after. There's no guaranteed parking for library users in the adjacent ramp now, which is likely to be filled with conventioneers. The parking garage has been full frequently during the many events here, leaving library users with next to nothing for parking, much less accessible parking. Please designate land owned by the city a DMC zone. One potentially feasible location was formerly a think bank building and is now being used for some police department offices. The existing building could potentially could remain and have a new library incorporated. For example, the landscaping and parking areas with the small plaza are very nice. The location is easily accessible, and there may be a transit route up by the location on 41st and West River Road. It is also near Hy-Vee shopping that would make it convenient for people to double up shopping with a library trip. Accessible parking. A free public library is not free if parking costs $12 a day. An hour free in an adjacent ramp actually discourages library use to its full extent. Metered parking limited to 30-minute options with no exceptions for handicapped people. I know, I got a ticket. Further discourage library use. There are only 2 dedicated handicap spots for the library in front of the door, and that is not enough. I have photos of cars with hang tags who have been forced to park in the 30-minute spots. A recent survey established that the dedicated handicap parking was occupied 70% of the time, but it did not take into account the number of people with disabilities who instead suffered parking in the very non-ADA ramp or simply skipped stopping at the library at all. More room than just going up. The location I'm referring to, although I'm open to any swap deal, whatever, you all could come up with. The location sits adjacent to a soccer field, also owned by the city. It might be possible to build a large area for heavy book stacks underground beneath the soccer field, maximizing available space. Skylights could be
I think we're at the 2-minute.
Oh, sorry. Okay, anyway.
Could I, are these, do you have your remarks written? Because we would definitely accept that, and I think as that comes forward, that would be the sort of testimony
Okay,
that would be
let me
helpful.
just write, I have a blog with all kinds of information
Terrific.
on expansion options or branches or other things, and I'll just write the URL.
Excellent, thank you so much. Any other public comments? Public comment? Okay, good, thank you very much. All right, let's move on. We're into the chair's report. I am not the chair. I am, however, taking her notes, so bear with me on this. The executive committee, the first point we wanted to make is met on May 24th. We were joined by the mayor, which was great. There were a couple action items. One of them was the approval of the DMCC audit. Craig Popenhagen presented it, and it was a draft audit. It was clean. There were no findings of any internal controls or compliance. Jim Beer, we want to thank also for being part of that, and Dale Mortenson and Craig Popenhagen did great work on that. So that's moved forward. We're happy about that. The second action is the approval of the trademark for Discovery Square. I think we've talked about this before. We frankly didn't want to talk a whole lot about it until the trademark was done, but the trademark is now done, which is great, and so there won't be another Discovery Square showing up on a brew pub somewhere. We're very happy that we now have that. The transportation work session is the second point that the chair wanted me to make. The work session, we had the second of three work sessions that are planned. That was on June 14th, and we had a pretty good attendance that included some council members and some county partners. And the goal is to really look at 3 different scenarios there for parking and transportation management and street use and the city loop, as it's being called, and then to discuss the pros and cons of each of those. I believe, is Director Freeze going to present to us later, right? Am I
Mr.
correct?
Chair, if you would like, I think Ken Holte is here to make a couple remarks, if you would like him to
Does that come later in the agenda?
No, it would be here.
Yeah, I wonder if we could call him up, Ken? Certainly. Yeah, thanks so much. Just the top line, but just so those who weren't there can get a briefing, would be great, right there.
Take the chair, any chair?
Yes, this chair is fine.
Thank you.
Welcome.
For
Let me
having
just
me here
introduce
today.
yourself, just
So,
for the record.
My name is Ken Holte. I am with SRF Consulting Group, and I am the program manager for the city of Rochester for the infrastructure improvements related to the DMC.
Thank you.
Okay. So real quickly, to follow up on your comments, Mr. Chair, the workshop that was held on the 14th did consist of the DMCC board, city council members, county board members, and EDA board members. And it was an interactive work session that was meant to garner ideas, foster conversation, and to draw out more input. That actually followed an open house that was held to the public that also did the same event. And there were a number of themes and ideas that came out of both the public open house as well as the work session with the entities that were there. And so we've taken those now and taken those back to the 4 transportation transit studies that are going on and are very tightly bound together. And the 3 scenarios that you mentioned are currently under quite intense evaluation and scrutiny to take into those comments, but to basically drill down to one. We don't expect that any one of those scenarios, as you saw it previously, will survive, I'll say, in whole. But the idea was to have a broad set of options that would look at a variety of ways and tasks to look at the city loop, the transit option, the circulator, so that we can kind of pick and choose the best route, the best mode. Of course, one of the big themes that we heard back in June was probably more of a desire to separate the markets and look at more of the specific solutions and have instead of a singular universal solution, really the best overall, so I'll say individual solutions to give us a broader transportation system that's most effective. So we're working on that. You mentioned June was the second of a workshop. There will be a third that we'll be looking at the end of September. We're looking at starting to have our answers probably the first week or two of September internally. We'll be vetting them. We'll take them to the city. We'll have another work session, as I just mentioned. We're probably going to have about a 3-day event here in the city the end of September. Again, another public open house, a work session with this group and others as need be. And the idea there is that we're going to be presenting our recommendations of what the final solution should be, what the mode should be, what routes we're going to use, et cetera. We fully expect that this will be a lot of information to absorb. We fully expect that there will be a lot of questions, and that's okay, that's good. So we want to give that work session that opportunity for folks to absorb that and to be able to come back to us so we can answer those questions. That's what we're tasked with. From a further scheduling standpoint, we'll be looking at probably coming back to the City Council in mid-October based on their calendar, and then to this board first part of November based on your schedule for a more formal endorsement of that topic. Of that selection of those recommendations and that. So that's our initial schedule here. There will be some follow-up meetings to that even into the early 2018 once you kind of set your schedule as well with some final report adoptions and things of that nature. We'll be talking about the implementations and the costs. There's been discussions of phasing and how we do that. That will come in the fourth quarter of this calendar year, so post-September, but we'll be developing all of that to share with you for your absorption as well as we go forward into the new year.
Good, thank you. I just, in my memory bank, were other board members there at any comments that you would have on?
Yeah, I was there for part of it, but I wasn't able to stay. I just wanted to ask the question, and one of the persons that oftentimes speaks here is Richard Olin. Was there any consideration continuing with elevated transit system of some sort?
There is. One of the options is to look at elevation, the scenario D, as it was labeled in the workshop, does have an elevated component. That's also tied to the autonomous vehicles. Again, looking at broad range. So we have not, I'll say, totally dropped that idea. I know there was discussion. I wasn't at the work session myself. I was unfortunately absent, but I know in reviewing the tapes, as it were, the discussion of is that really a valid, expenditure? Should we be looking at that? We did not totally drop it, but we have pared down our efforts in that respect because of you can make some certain engineering judgments, if you will, and so we've kind of toned that down a little bit. We've had some other communications from Mr. Olin, and we've continued to respond to that.
I just wanted to add a couple of things that I think just the whole board and I wanted the public to know. The points that I was taking out of those meetings were, number one, the discussion has really evolved from looking at a single solution. Can we build one thing that changes everything into a family of solutions? Meaning we have people coming from all directions, and in this case, many, many, many point sources throughout the whole part of southern Minnesota. And so one of the things that's really emerged as a real pinch point is 52 and Civic Center Drive. And so there was a lot of discussion about whether at that pinch point a parking facility could be there, and then how do you move folks to their destination. As you really dissect that, you start to recognize not everybody is coming to this part of downtown. If you think about part of the folks coming here and part to St. Mary's, you can look at different solutions from those sorts of points. That gives us some really exciting options, but it kind of deconstructs the issue. It means that we're not going to be able to do one big thing, which means that the more expensive rail, elevated, sunken sorts of strategies become less viable from just the way I looked at it to more of a family of solutions. And that's just one person's opinion on it, but it is something that's really emerged. There's also been, I think, a lot of discussion about how do we get biking and walking into all of this, and the city loop has been a very symmetrical grid as we've seen it. But if we really think about the challenge of trying to get more people to do that, and how do we add value to the residents who live nearby, then we shouldn't necessarily be thinking of just like a grid. We should think more Indianapolis-style cultural trail, which winds where it wants to, connecting green amenities like Kotzky Park and the river, coming through the center and all. So I think there's been some really, really good conversations on that. And as somebody who's been very concerned about the direction and how quickly we're moving on transportation, I think these work sessions have been hugely helpful, and I really feel progress. Do others want to add on that or not? Susan, anything? I know. Okay, good.
Just heard about the ADA issues. Will that be considered as well?
Yes, most absolutely.
Okay. And I like what was said about biking trail, just like the ones that they had in Indianapolis in terms of cultural trails and connecting amenities. So glad to hear that pedestrian and bikeways are considered.
Yeah, that's going to be throughout. So the component of the pedestrian as opposed to the vehicle is a very high priority in the whole system, but certainly making sure that we've got specific amenities for those as well is on the table, certainly.
Good. Seeing no one else, thank you very much, appreciate that. Just moving through the chair's report, the third point is to just talk about the 2018 budget. As in the past, the chair would like to ask for volunteers from the board for this project, knowing that we can't all be deeply enmeshed in the details of it like we'd like to, and we would probably need to get some of that depth outside the meeting. So we'd like to ask for volunteers on this. This budget's going to be the EDA budget and work plan, the 5-year capital improvement plan, and the review of the working capital loan, along with the basic DMCC part of the budget. Are there folks from this board who'd like to volunteer? I see Mr. Doherty stepping forward, which we really appreciate.
And I'd be happy to
Mr.
join
Hickey
him.
and Mr. Campbell. This is great. That's wonderful. We really appreciate it. That's one of those seemingly small things that's huge because they're taking extra time off of the time they're already volunteering to do that. So thank you very much for doing that. Let me just do a quick timeline then. So the agreements with the EDA and the city require the EDA to give its draft budget to us by August 1st, and for the DMCC to submit their total approved budget to the city by September. So we've asked for an extension of the timeline. That last went to November 2nd to meet our next regular meeting. So that is what we have on that. Any other questions on the budget process? Good. Okay. The couple other points the chair wanted us to go through, the DEED certification. The Department of Employment and Economic Development has approved certification of the expenditures for Mayo and the DMCC are all correct. That basically means this whole agreement we have with the state where there's required to be a certain amount of investment to get the money flowing from the state. That's now been validated by the state. So now we've collectively exceeded the $200 million threshold of investment. And that's a big deal because what it means is now the state money flows and DEED will be transferring $2,600,000 to the city before September 3rd. So that's a big, big point for all of us. And it means basically this project's delivering on its promise to the state that their investment would lead to additional investment, and it's a good validation we're moving forward. So now that it's starting to move, so that's going. Any other point, Mayor?
Nope, we're just pleased.
Yeah, please, good.
And to point out that it's not a huge amount of money, but it is money coming.
Yeah, it is absolutely, and I think it's really important. There'll be a point later that'll talk about what the city.
I'd just like to add that this is the reason we've been doing this for the last several years, and I'd encourage the staff to, quote-unquote, celebrate cash flowing to Rochester. That's outstanding.
With a cheap, practical celebration of COVID. And so that leads to the next point the chair wanted us to raise, which is the City of Rochester reimbursement resolution. I mean, one of the issues we have here is really this issue of cash flow. And so here the city stepped up, and now that's going to begin to move forward on repaying that. The city used I'm looking for that, the mayor, the flood control reserve, account, and so now the sales tax will be used to pay that back. I think this one point, I want to, by the way, thank Gary Newman for doing some great work on this. Thank you very much. The one point that I want to just reiterate that we've raised before is because cash flow is important and because what we do is we are making long-term decisions and it's tough for us to keep this big financial picture in our head, I really feel that we on the board increasingly need deeper tools about how we're balancing up other things. As we come up with these big projects, we're going to hear about Heart of the City today. We're going to be thinking about the theater, we're thinking about transportation. It all sounds really good, just like everything in our daily life sounds good, but we make choices up against the budget. And I think the more we can understand, how investing here will diminish our ability to invest over there, and how that impacts cash flow. Because cash flow is a really important part of this. And I think we need to challenge ourselves to put deeper tools in front of us that we can put in front of the public, so we're not looking at this as much one-off. I know we're all looking strategically, but I just think we still are not in the position where we need to be able to put those very transparent tools in front of the public. Other thoughts on that? Good, okay. So let's move on to the next point, which is the DMCC Form 90 report. And let me turn to Craig Popenhagen, please. Welcome, Craig.
Good morning, and thank you very much. We'll take care of let's see. So we do have I believe just a brief PowerPoint that I would just kind of walk through here.
Could you just give us a quick context for the audience and all of us about the point right at this stage?
Certainly. So at this point, the audit for the DMCC has been issued, and then now at this point, we're filing the annual form, IRS Form 990, and that is an annual filing requirement with the IRS, as well as some reporting to the state. And this is, we're presenting the draft of those forms in the board packet to use board members for review and acceptance and approval prior to final filing. So that's where we are.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, let's see, we do have it. All right. Okay, so rather than force everyone to flip page by page through about a 50-page tax return, I'll just hit the high points here. So the main purpose of the form is the Form 990. It does encapsulate all of the financial information that is included in the DMCC's audited financial statements. It's that information is categorized somewhat differently, but it is based on the same information or same numbers that we audited. So it does agree back. Part 2, or Part 3, I'm sorry, of the 990 just iterates the DMCC's mission and organizational purpose. The page numbers in parentheses are the numbers at the bottom of the page of the form. So if you are trying to follow along, that's what those pages relate to. Part 6 is kind of an overview of governance, how the organization is governed. You do have committees. You do keep minutes of your meetings. The draft 990 today is presented to you for acceptance and review before final filing. That is a best practice and a question on the form. It is something that the IRS does look for. It also explains kind of the governance policies. So the main one being the conflict of interest policy that DMCC follows. It is the same as Minnesota statutes, since directors are public officials. Part 7, on page 7, lists out who the board members are. Schedule B on page 21 is basically a list of contributors. So in other words, how do you get your funding? What is your source? Now up until this point we hadn't crossed the 200 million yet, so the source has been the city of Rochester. Schedule R lists out related parties or related organizations. The related organization for DMCC is of course the DMC EDA, the Economic Development Agency. There was no unrelated business income for 2016, so with a nonprofit organization, which is how you're organized, the DMCC is organized. If there is unrelated business income, meaning income from sources that maybe are not are outside of your mission, there is an obligation to track those and report those. There are none for 2016. The final filing deadline then for the 990 is November 15th. So the first filing deadline is back in May, so May 15th. We were in the process of finalizing the audit at that time, so did file an extension of the 990. It's a one-time extension now, so it extends all the way out to November 15th. So we are well ahead of that deadline. The next piece of information in the packet that gets filed is the Charitable Organization Annual Report. This is an annual filing with the Attorney General's Office, Charities Division. Kind of the high points here for the form is basically there's no state changes in DMCC's operations. So no changes in tax exempt status. There's no changes in your mission or organizational purpose. There's no change in your ability to solicit contributions. And up to this point, you have not solicited contributions from the public in general. Back in the first year of creation of DMCC, you did file as a soliciting organization, basically to kind of cover your bases if indeed you started soliciting for contributions from the public in general. So no changes there. Basically, DMCC does not have its own employees, so there's no compensation paid at all, let alone paid in excess of $100,000 to any one officer. Financial information, again, there's financial information on this form. It has changed in format a little bit from the previous year, but as with the 990, the financial information included in the charitable organization report is the same numbers that we used to produce the audit, so it all does reconcile back. Again, the filing deadline here is November 15th. The last piece of information then is the Minnesota Nonprofit Corporation Annual Registration. This is something that we always look online. We can check that with the Secretary of State, at least to see if you're registered and in good standing. DMCC is in good standing through December 31st of 2017. The annual renewal then has to be done online, and that has to be done by someone from DMCC. That changed a few years ago where that is not basically a form that gets included with this 990 packet. So that is a to-do list that'll be on your side of the table to take care of that before the end of the year, but it would just continue on your good standing in filing with the Secretary of State. So that's what I have for you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, we have a motion in the packet. It's on page 17, under which tab are we on, folks? Well, under the IRS Form 990. And the resolution is that we approve the 2017 Minnesota Charitable Organization Report and 2016 Form 990. And that also we authorize the chair or the treasurer to take any action to make any amendments necessary and file the annual report and Form 990.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. All right, why don't we move then to, excuse me. Just get myself caught up. Say I wanted to back up. I ignored the chair's recommendations inadvertently. And when we called for volunteers for the budget committee, I believe she also talked to Vicki. Are you willing to serve on that as well?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your help on that. Good. So, sorry to miss that, but if the notes can just, I guess you can't pretend that I didn't miss that, but know that I came back and did that. Okay, next we're going to have a project update on the Discovery Square project. And as we go through that, I think one of the things that just as you're getting ready, the context of this is really important because it's, as I was trying to think back to precedents on this building, it's very complicated because there are times when the public and the private work together on, say, an office building or a hotel or another thing. This is a public-private building. I guess precedent would be to go back to almost the World Trade Center in St. Paul, where there's a building that is office space but also has this public component. I guess the university research laboratories at the university, these public-private parts. But I put this context in because as we're going through this report, because we rarely deal with this kind of project, if when you and when the Mortenson team answer questions, if you can know that one of the things in the back of our heads is trying to understand where should the public step in on an office building, which is not that common in the state, but what is the public purpose that requires additional investment? So if you and Mortenson, as you talk through, because I think that's a context that we and the public need as we're going through this. So why don't we begin with you?
Thank you. Thank you, Board Chair and board members. Thanks for the invitation to share the information about this particular project. 1 year ago, we announced our concept of Discovery Square in San Francisco, and now one short year later, we are in front of you with this first life science project. So I think it's a really wonderful indication of progress. And a couple of thoughts I wanted to share with you also. You do know that the EDA board does due diligence on all of the projects behind the scenes. They also have a subcommittee of the EDA board that does review the projects, does all of the assessment in terms of financial assessments, and then we bring it forward to you for your final review and action. So we have done that. We've also worked with our city colleagues. Terry Spaeth is with us, and Patrick Sieb led our part on the DMC EDA. And just to reiterate what Chair Ryback mentioned, this is our catalyst, and we've talked about this for years as the DMC plan has come forward. This particular project means jobs, and it means new companies, and it means creating a supportive ecosystem which will support all of that and more. So
Could I be rude enough to stop? Just I want to make sure, Susan, can you see the slides from where you are?
No, it would be beneficial if you just turned it.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. So could somebody turn the camera? Tell us when you can see them, Susan.
I can see it.
Good, okay, sorry.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Patrick and Terry to give you the details, a reminder of what this project is, the details of some of the work that we've done. Chair Ryback, we can talk about the funding request, and then we'll move it forward to you for discussion and action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Patrick Sieb with Destination Medical Center, and I'm joined with Terry Spaeth, a colleague from the city of Rochester, and together we are prepared to make a recommendation regarding this project. You, of course, have seen this project at several stages during the process, and we have been working very closely with the developer as they have brought their project to this stage. Before we ask you to take action or consideration, we think it's important to provide some context for this decision. As Lisa said, the Discovery Square subdistrict is a geography in the DMC district, one of 6 subdistricts. That, along with transportation and heart of the city, Discovery Square, heart of the city, and transportation are your stated priorities and have been the priorities that we have pursued. Not that there isn't things going on in other subdistricts, but we have understood this to be a priority. So this subdistrict, which shows up on this illustration, and we have pins in the map to help, again, provide some context. This goal of a 16-block area that is a live-work environment that is really organized around the idea of attracting the best and brightest to our community to attract and retain. Already in this subdistrict, there is new residential development happening. 501 on First, recently opened. Urban on First, which has been before you and you have supported, is progressing, and residents at Discovery Square, a new development adopted by City Council recently, adding to our residential options in this very sub-district. Additionally, there's new restaurants and retail, so the vibrancy of the district is growing. Blue Duck, Gallery 24, Pasquale's, retail that will be in the Urban on First project yet to be determined, a child care center that's proposed in the new residential development, and Damsey, replacing what had been China Star. All of these, by the way, represent new entrepreneurs to our community. These are all startup businesses. So this idea of an ecosystem around business development and startup is already occurring. And probably the flagship of this thus far has been the high-tech work that is happening in the Conley Mass Building, home to Area 10 Labs, Brandhoot, two high-tech companies, and Collider, which is a co-working space, it's itself home to 23 businesses. So this is the environment that is being created in the Discovery Square District. And it is consistent with the plan, the stated objectives of the plan. And I highlight one of the metrics that was derived or identified during the development plan, which is the growth and the need for additional biomed and tech space. Different than the health category, but biomed and tech space, suggesting that there is a need for 180,000 square feet during this first phase. And that's really where this new project fits in. In this image, we see the beginning, we see the opportunity for new development that will occur over time. And today, we're talking about one building in one location. And it's important as we have this conversation today that we're asking this one building, we're asking this one building to do a lot, really outsizing what a normal single building would do, because we're asking it to be the catalyst for the rest of this to occur. And we're asking it to provide some of the physical infrastructure that will help support the rest of the district as it grows. So this one building, also it's important and obvious in this picture, it looks like a bit like it's parked out on an island. So part of our challenge and opportunity with this as we support this project is to help it become integrated into the rest of the city, so that as future buildings occur and grow up, this will feel fully connected. The project is presently known as Mortenson Phase 1 Discovery Square Development. So whoever wants to come up with a better name, there is an opportunity to do so. That's our starting place.
Could I, just for a very quick second, we've just gotten a trademark. We're trying to trademark Discovery Square.
That's right.
Mortenson's a great developer. Why is it called Mortenson? Did they pay for naming rights? Or
No. This is the working title, and as you might imagine, before this project is finalized, it will have a real name. But this is the working title.
But aren't we calling it Discovery Square? My point is, I think what we really need to do is to identify a brand, drive the brand like crazy. People should say it. A really brilliant marketer, John Pellegrin, ran Target for a long time. And why is Target called Target Center instead of Target Forum or whatever?
Yeah.
Because they wanted a bland name, so you said Target all the time, okay? We're going to say one name on this. We're either going to say the Mortenson Project or the Discovery Square Development.
Yeah.
And I just think we've got to keep, if we're building a brand, let's build it.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, and Lisa, perhaps you want to comment, but I will just say that ultimately this building will have a name, and the district itself, the Discovery Square District, will be a very strongly branded district. And we expect this building and many others to be part of the district. Again, already we have the Conley Mass Building and Collider within the district.
So I'll just add that the Discovery Square brand is going to be the 16-block area. It's a Discovery Square district, so it could be name of building in Discovery Square.
Or
So we're-
Discovery Square 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, so we're working on the branding right now.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, yeah, I don't think we want to delve too far into a micro thing, but I do think we are building a brand. And if we're introducing two brands, Discovery Square and the name of a specific building, I think we're fighting against ourselves.
Why don't you just make it Phase 1 Discovery Square,
Yeah,
and then
that's
Phase
just-
2 Discovery Square?
That works perfectly for me. Anyways,
Yeah.
let's just take that advice.
Right,
But
of course.
I think it's an important issue that isn't just a simple issue.
I think, Mr. Chair, as you mentioned, Jeremy Jacobs from Mortenson Development is here and is prepared to join us at any point should you have additional questions.
Great.
And he'd be fully prepared to talk about the particular branding exercise they're going through on this building and the relationship we have with them in terms of that overall brand structure. So we're absolutely simpatico. These do represent images of the building, and again, I think what's important to see in these images is the quality and character of this building, both the transparency. One of our goals is to make Discovery Square something that the community engages with. We've heard a lot over time through the research that people wonder what's going on inside Mayo, they wonder what's going on inside these buildings. And we asked the developer to think about that, and they came back to us with this very transparent design, this very interactive design, a design that welcomes the community into the building, both through the openness of the building, the programmable space within the building, and the street level cafe opportunity associated with it. Some of the details associated with this building. It is a signature new building in Discovery Square, and I want to say new building. I want to again acknowledge other investments that have been occurring in the Discovery Square sub-district and the relationship this will have to those other projects. It will be a catalyst for future life science in the life science economy in Rochester, and there is a very coherent leasing strategy that positions this project as being that catalyst. By attracting anchor tenants, it will attract other investors and other companies into Rochester who would not otherwise consider Rochester. It has very ambitious energy and sustainability standards that it is targeting. Things like bike racks and shower facilities. It's a roughly 89,000 square foot building, 4-story, 80,000 of rentable space, which will include lab. So not a typical office building by any means, having lab space, additional office and collaborative space and public space and retail associated with it. Many of these really out of scale for what one single building would typically do because it's being positioned to fulfill and serve as other buildings develop. And I mentioned anchor tenants, and I say Mayo Plus. I think the worst kept secret in town is the other one, which I won't say publicly, but it's been said many times publicly, but really is about creating the kind of tenants that will attract other tenants into this building. And I won't go into the entire strategy around Mayo's occupancy other than to say Mayo has been very intentional about the departments and the research arms that will be in this building, and that they are dispersed throughout the building. They're not occupying single floors and separated from other tenants. They're in fact being integrated with other tenants. This is a very important strategy and very much appreciated approach from our point of view in terms of how Mayo is working with us. When we evaluate projects, again, we do this in collaboration with our city partners. We evaluate a project both to determine whether or not it meets the test of a public infrastructure project as defined by the DMC legislation, and whether or not it meets your priorities and your values. And we are prepared to enthusiastically say, indeed it does. We also then, once it meets that test, we then evaluate the project in terms of the economic viability of the project. And we receive from the developer very detailed financial pro forma that allows us to assess the economics of the project and determine from our own point of view, given that we believe it is a project that meets public infrastructure tests and one that meets your priorities, is there public support necessary for it to progress? And if so, what is the level of public support necessary? So we evaluate their pro forma against proposed rate of return, their anticipated construction costs, their anticipated absorption rates, rental rates, and carrying costs, et cetera, to do our own due diligence to determine whether or not there is a gap between the project that we want to see and the cost to deliver that project.
I wonder if we could just pause on this for a minute and see if there are any
Please.
questions from the board members, because it does seem that the point I was making is illustrated by this. When does the public step in to make the building more than the market would create? Any thoughts on this? Those where you see EG there? I would generally argue that all of them, with the exception of, I'm not sure, physical transparency, other than maybe the point there is for the public to be able to get what's going on inside the building. I would say all of those are part of it. One of the questions I have that I want to ask either you or Jeremy from Mortenson is, what is it that's guaranteed that this will continue to serve its function? Meaning, let's say Bob's House of Logistics moves into Rochester, and that's a great company and all of that, and they've just got this need for more space. So they want to lease some space in it. Well, Bob's House of Logistics is a good business, but that's not what Destination Medical Center is about. So all of a sudden, they're competing with somebody who may not be able to pay as much, but is very core to our idea of having catalytic med and bio type businesses there. Would that be you answering that, or Jeremy, or?
I think that'd be a good question for Mr. Jacobs to answer and respond to.
Good. We can hold till you come up, whatever is, let's let you finish your report, but that's a big question that I have on it. Other points people have? Okay, good. Why don't you move on?
So this is a $35 million project. The tax base will grow from $68,000 to $485,000 per year. We talk about jobs, both short-term and long-term jobs. We also evaluate the eligible public infrastructure, again, referring to the DMC legislation. There is, we believe, nearly $7 million of eligible public infrastructure. And I think, Mr. Chair, you said something that is absolutely apropos. We're asking this building to do something that perhaps the market isn't prepared for, and moreover, we're asking this building to do things that that really only make sense in the context of other buildings being developed around it. So we're asking this building to have public space and cafe, and to have the physical transparency is a very big deal, and it is costly. It is more expensive to have a building that has the kind of glass exposure and the number of doors, front doors, if you will, and access points. So these are the kinds of things that we asked for of the developer, and very pleased at how they have delivered on that. We've also asked that they really lead LEAD in our community around energy and sustainability, and they have from the beginning committed to a very high energy consumption standard, a program, or rather the energy code, but 20% less, if you will, less energy than is required in the energy code, a very ambitious commitment. We have also been working with them more recently on a strategy for LEED certification, and have found a pathway for that to occur, and they have made a commitment to work with us in achieving that as well. So in your packet is the report that you ask us to complete, which is the evaluation criteria, and it's organized around these 7 or 8 sections, if you will. And I'm happy to respond to any questions you have about the report itself. Again, it's in your packet. Happy to have Jeremy join us if there's further questions. But ultimately, our recommendation is that this board approves the project as a public infrastructure project and provides financial support to the project using a tax increment financing program that is enabled by the DMC legislation. So this is not traditional tax increment financing. It is the same mechanism, but it is in this case enabled by the DMC legislation.
Okay, any questions at this point? I know we want, yes, please.
I do have a question. I know there was kind of a recent change to provide some additional assistance to increase the energy efficiency of the building. The question I would have is, from where the project was before this additional requirement or incentive to provide LEED certification, what's the payback period for this LEED certification? So I think it's very important that we encourage energy efficiency, but it also has to be practical, and there has to be a quantifiable payback period for these improvements.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's something you can answer, if Kevin Bright can answer.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Hickey, I am probably not prepared to answer particularly specifically the payback period.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if Kevin can answer that either, but I'd rather have Kevin try to answer it than me.
There you go.
So if we could hold that question.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Susan, sorry, yep, see, and by the way, I'm watching, I missed you this time, but just give a wave when we're watching it there. So Susan, go ahead.
That'll be fine. To what extent has this project been coordinated with the transportation plan?
Thank you, Susan. This project has been very much in the consideration with the transportation plan. So the consideration around parking, for example, is part of the parking analysis that's being done. The route of the potential transit line, circulator, and the bike and pedestrian routes are all being this project and other projects around it are central to the discussion going on with the transportation initiative. Thank you for that question.
Could I add on to that, because I think this is a really, really important point. The developer and Mayo, and Jeff, I want to thank you personally for taking this, has done something different here than would have been done. Had this building been built, in most cases, it would have had more parking built into it. The developer, Mayo, and the city all made a decision not to put as much parking in it so that we could, instead of jamming up that part of town, rely more on this integrated transportation system. That's a really big deal, and that's a leap of faith that I think the city, especially Mayo, has taken. And one of the reasons I'm so hyper about keeping us moving forward on this transportation issue is this is a deal, okay? One person let go of the trapeze, and we got to make sure the other one, in the form of the transportation plan, comes forward. So, Susan, I see this as deeply tied to the plan, but we are only in the process of delivering our part of the deal. So I hope every person who develops a project in town is as coordinated with the transportation vision as we are, but it also means we got to deliver. We have to deliver, I should say. Okay, thank you. All right, so why don't we, Jeremy, why don't we ask you, representing Mortenson, to come forward and add on this. And did I see any other questions at this point? Okay, go ahead.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Good to be here. Mayor, I'll echo what you just said.
Just introduce yourself for the record.
I'm sorry, I'm Jeremy Jacobs, and I'm with Mortenson Development. This project, I think, has been a series of leaps of faith in that we were asked to develop a market-rate bio-life science building that would create a new economy. And in so doing, do it in such a way that would be a compelling new opportunity for the city of Rochester, provide a canvas to place science on display so that we could advertise not only to the local market but to the world what's happening, the types of tenants that we hope to recruit, sort of expect to be in a building like the one that we hope to provide. But in so doing, we're doing that in a market that doesn't yet exist. And so we have banks and others looking at us to say, prove the economics of your strategy. And that's where, working with this team, we've really come a long way in saying this is the strategy that makes this palatable to check all of the boxes that have been put before us as a developer to make this project successful. So it's truly taken a village, and we feel really good about where we are today.
Could you answer from the developer's standpoint that question about why and when should the public step in and put resources into a private development? We went through some of those there, but how do you look at this? I mean, for instance, how much could an office building get on the market here, and then how much is the subsidy tied into making sure that those rents are competitive for the market we're looking for? And also address this issue of how do we know a few years from now? Just to set a context for that, the World Trade Center was built with a lot of public money. It currently has very few tenants that involve world trade. There were a lot of reasons for all of that, but we certainly don't want that situation a few years from now. So I gave you about 6 super huge questions. I wonder if you would.
Well, let me try to take those one by one. So the public investment, I think, is huge. And what I like to do is look at comparable developments that are life science developments around the country. I turn to Boston and look what the state of Massachusetts did there to invest in the bio-life science community of Boston. Just recently, the state announced another $500 million to support just the bio-life science community of Boston. So that type of investment to create and sustain a new type of economy is one that is deep, and we have models that we can look to around the country. Similarly, I looked at Cortex in St. Louis, another great example that we sort of most closely followed as a path towards our project. And there you have a wide variety of stakeholders who are making annual sustaining capital investments into Cortex and what that is. That includes University of Washington, St. Louis, the City of St. Louis, the State of Missouri, several local hospitals, all of which are making million and multi-million dollar foundation grants to Cortex to sustain the businesses, the small businesses that are there that are trying to grow. So it doesn't happen on its own. It does take sort of sustained investment and deep partnerships with public-private stakeholders. We've seen that model play out, and where private developers or public entities have tried to do it alone, it generally hasn't been successful. So working together, we feel like we've got a successful recipe to make this happen. Now, to address the second part of your question, how do you know that this investment is going to pay off? I wish I had the 8-ball to prove that, but what I do know is that Mortenson is a partner in the deal. And so what we mean by that is we're not going out just to look to fill the building. Of course, we have creditors who will be very excited when that happens, but more importantly, we're looking to grow a synergy within the district that will lead to new businesses forming here, growing here, and having needs and future developments here. That only happens if we provide tenants within the building that can partner with organizations like Mayo Clinic, that can use the opportunity to collaborate with Mayo as an organization to grow their idea and make it flower into something much larger, then provide them with the space that they need to stay here so that they don't then follow the capital to the coast, which is historically what's been the trend in bio-life science.
But you have a pro forma, you have creditors. At the end of the day, your job is to respond back to them. You have 2 tenants who come forward, one who represents the kind of people we've been talking about for several years, and one who's a perfectly good office tenant, but they're able and willing to pay more and take more and all of that. What in the way that that business structure is done helps us get a sense that we're gonna have the tenants we want in here instead of just perfectly solid, good office tenants, but ones who aren't as catalytic to life sciences?
That's right. That's another good question. So there's no question that the investment being made ultimately will help provide an opportunity for young startup businesses who don't otherwise have the capital they need to afford the infrastructure that our building will have. If we were to take this to market as is, rents in the building would be north of $30 a foot. We know as a starter that no one in the market today is paying that for office space, much less for lab. So to provide a magnet, we need to be able to go to market with a much more competitive opportunity for those businesses to come in. Those rates are still at the high end of the existing market, but that's a risk that we're willing to take, that we'll be able to attract new tenants who can't afford those rates and then grow their businesses here.
But is the public subsidy sequestered within your pro forma dedicated to a certain type of tenant, or how does, what screen do you put on what types of tenants are in here, or is there something like that?
Well, there's no quote-unquote deed restriction or legal proviso, if you will, that requires us to recruit only bio-life science tenants. But the attestation that we've always made to this group is that our intent is always to fill the building with synergistic tenants.
Are there other questions or comments?
No, it's a beautiful building. We had a presentation of it, and hearing you talk about the risk and the trapeze thing and all that, maybe it's the leap of faith here is maybe the building should be the Walendas, you know.
Yeah.
But I also, more seriously, and I've been away from Mayo for a while, but I always think of Kendall Hench, who developed cortisone, Nobel Prize winners. Someday there'll be two buildings there, Kendall and Hench. Maybe that's where he should go.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Okay, I appreciate the comments you just made on that. Frankly, I don't think we have this tight enough, that question tied up tight enough. I think we should continue to have an ongoing conversation about this, because this is just like a battle-scarred veteran of things like World Trade Center, of university research labs and all of that. I mean, there are incubators all over this country. There's only one Mayo Clinic. That's the market advantage we have. And there's a very logical reason for the kind of company we want to have to locate next door, but there's not a very logical reason for a developer to make a decision that helps the public good more than the pro forma. And that doesn't question the incredibly good record Mortenson has and all of it. It's just that in the world of business with creditors and all of that, I think we want to continually be asking this question about how is the public money that was here to create catalytic biotech businesses guaranteed to stay there? Or if we don't need that, at least surface the question of why. So, any other questions that we have on this? Okay, yeah.
I do want to respond to
Yeah, please.
Mr. Hickey's question and ask Kevin if you could join us. Kevin Bright, who is the Energy and Sustainability Director for DMC, and also with the City of Rochester, supported by the McKnight grant that was encouraged by this board. So Kevin has been working with us on the energy and sustainability elements, and I think better prepared to answer Mr. Hickey's question.
Sure. So I thought I'd just go over the process that we took with the Mortenson team. So 6 iterations of energy models were created for the building, and we elected one that reached the 20% energy target below hash rate 90.1 2010, which is the current energy code in the state. So there is a cost premium associated with that, as well as LEED. Both of those integrated just energy savings alone. The payback period, simple payback, is 10 years. There's associated water savings with both of these that aren't calculated in there. So the fact that this is a 20-year plan and we're not assuming the project's going away in 10 years, that's where we're at.
Yeah, I'll just say that's outstanding. I mean, that kind of payback in that time frame is an absolutely important investment, so I'm very encouraged by that. And thank you for your work on this.
Okay.
Other questions? And underscoring that, thanks to McKnight. Jeremy, let me ask a question about, were you going to?
No,
Okay.
Justin,
Let me ask you a question. Has Mortenson ever done a building that hit this level of certification for energy standards?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
A number of LEED certified from silver to platinum.
So why in this case is the public paying for that, and why in those cases did it not?
But there's a big, I suppose, difference, if you will, between Mortenson as an organization and our capacity as a contractor, moving the needle in LEED. On the development side, where we always wrestled with this team is, can we sustain kind of the lease rates that we've been talking about and provide the level of attractiveness while also doing the more aspirational things like LEED and the ash rate savings. And we did as much as we could possibly do to kind of make the building make economic sense without taking the sort of extra mile, if you will, to get to LEED. But with additional support, we feel like it makes total sense. It just didn't make sense for our pro forma and the deal that we're going to be taking to financiers to say it makes sense for us to make that extra investment above and beyond. Of all the things that we had to trade off, that was one that early on got parked, and now we're happy that it's back into the deal.
Okay. Other questions? Comments? Okay, so we have a motion in the packet.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
there is
please.
a completely new set of documents at everybody's place, a new resolution, new report from the EDA, new letter of request from the city, and it reflects the increased TIF request amount. The original TIF request was 4.75 million. These documents and this morning, the description is for a $4.9 million TIF request. So I would.
move the resolution.
Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion? Can I ask a clarifying question? There was the original resolution, there's, is it 200,000 additional in here? 150 additional, and that is for the increased investment in the energy standards, am I correct on that? Okay, and just some background for the public and all, why was that increase there? Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
please.
so as we were assembling our reports in time for the publication of this document, we were still in conversation with the Mortenson team about a pathway to achieve the LEED certification. And there was some back and forth with the U.S. Green Building Council about the standards and how this building would qualify and under what certification. And so we are coming forward today with this addition because we just were able to resolve the methodology to get there, and we literally did that late yesterday when we were able to find that conclusion.
So part of, as I understand it, there's this dance you always do about what's it going to take to get the certification, and we want the certification because it's the right thing to do and it's a good marketing thing. As you've done that assessment now, you've seen that it's going to take a little more to get that, and that's being added into the package. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Other
And I will say that Mortenson's commitment to this is not without risk to them, and they know that they're stretching to achieve this, and we're very pleased that that they've been able to join us in finding this pathway.
Okay. So seeing any comment? The amended resolution's in front of you now. It's motioned and seconded. All those in, did we do a roll call? Or can we?
No, you don't.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstained? Very good. Thank you very much. Really
Thank
good
you.
presentation.
Thank you so
and
much.
I think it's just hugely important to keep this project moving forward, so thanks. Other comments? Okay.
Board Chair,
Yes, Susan.
I need to excuse myself at this time.
Thank you for participating. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let me catch myself up on this. Okay, so now we are moving to the project updates. Turn back to you guys.
Chair Ryback, thank you very much. Board members, we've got some project updates for you. We've got 3 basic project updates, and then we want to do public realm updates from the work that we've been doing for the past year or so.
Just could the rookie standing in co-chair apologize for a second? Ms. Lamb, did I neglect to look at that issue about 90 days and 180 days, or is that in the previous resolution?
Mr. Chair, the issue that, for the board that the chair is referring to is since December, when the board wanted to make it a condition that to every one of these project approvals that the project would have to come back within a 90-day period to provide evidence of financing satisfactory to the board. That still is in this resolution that was just passed. Whether the board wants to consider going forward, changing that 90-day period to, for example, 180 days is a discussion the board can have. But that's what was at issue.
So members, as I understand this issue, we have tried to make sure that we're not giving an unlimited amount of rope to developers and trying to make sure they get the funding in place. We've been saying that we need the financing in place after 90 days, as we've looked at it, and I think Mr. Doherty and Mr. Campbell especially, if I'm correct,
Yeah.
have dove into this. They're coming back and saying we should really move that 90 days to 180 days. And that's the recommendation, and that makes sense to me. So I think what we have done, however, is by taking the resolution we just could we go back and add that into that so it
No, I
applies?
don't want to do that.
That's not what you want to do?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's the other way.
Okay,
I
good.
apologize if you.
Okay, good. All right, so I think we've surfaced the issue, but we don't need to take action on it right
That's
now.
correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good. So again, I'm sorry for having missed that in my notes. Please go back and we'll pick it up there.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a few slides on each of the projects to remind you of what we're doing and how each project has progressed. Again, Patrick and Terry have both been great colleagues to move these projects forward, and we have a team of many behind it, and including quite a few stakeholders that are really helping us with these projects, moving them forward. I also want to comment on the public and community involvement in these projects as they're moving forward. Every project has done quite a bit of community involvement, whether it's neighborhood involvement and/or the committees that this group has put in place. So I would say there's been a lot of hands in these projects, and I think it's been very complimentary to the projects. And actually, as I'm watching them, the projects do change every time we see this community involvement. So it's been very positive, and I'm going to turn it over to Patrick and Terry to start talking about the project updates. There's 3 of them.
Patrick and Gary, as you go through that, the first one we're going to have an action on, so could you pause after that and allow us to take that? Thanks.
Absolutely. So, 3 projects that you have approved and are supporting. First being Urban on First, this being the mixed-use building on First Avenue, apartments and retail. As a reminder, it's a $38 million project. Property tax increase will go from $70,000 presently to $472,000, and you support this project with $3.8 million tax increment financing. It's located, as I said, on First Avenue. It continues to make progress. This was approved by this body in February and then went to City Council in late March. Subsequently, they've continued with their permitting and entitlement process with their schematic design work and continuing on to design documents. Groundbreaking is expected to occur in late 2017, and their financing continues to progress. This is a project that you did ask that it come forward with evidence of successful financing 90 days following the City Council's action. So we've asked the developer to provide us that information, and they have shared their progress with us. We've had, we believe that they are, while they haven't closed on their financing, they are making significant progress and on the trajectory to do so. I will just pause there because I know there's others who want to comment as well.
And the yellow note that Ms. Lamb just passed me was not anything sinister. It was reminding me that when Ms. Ronnie left, we lost our quorum. So do we provide a staff direction or guide us through what would be an appropriate action without the quorum?
Mr. Chair, the board could certainly provide a staff direction instead of a formal motion.
The staff direction to receive and file?
No, sorry, a staff direction asking the developer to, it's the same as the motion would have been.
Oh, I see,
Asking
okay.
the developer to return on November 2nd.
With evidence of financing?
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Does someone want to move that?
I will move that the Urban on First project report back to the board at the November 2nd board meeting with an update on the overall progress in the project and the financing.
Thank you.
I
Second?
second that.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Very good. Thank you very much. Move on.
A second brief update is the Titan Hilton Hotel. Again, this was the first project endorsed by this board. They broke ground in December of 2016 and are making significant progress in their construction itself. These photographs are from a recent hard hat tour, And already the project has another 2 floors associated with it from this just a few weeks ago. I will note that there are typically 50 or more workers on site every day, and as the building envelope closes, there will be more than 300 workers on site. It's a very active project at this point. Terry, perhaps you would like to make some comments as well?
Sure. Chair Ryback, members of the board, Terry Spaeth with City Administration here in Rochester. Just one thing I think is worth pointing out, in conjunction with the parking ramp that's being built adjacent to the Hilton project, which, by the way, the ramp is under construction now. When the council approved that bid award, they approved an alternate to structurally support that, or provide, funding to beef up the support structure of that ramp in order to accommodate some other uses on top of the ramp, such as some additional housing. And just to let the board know, the city prepared an RFP for that. It's out on the street now, and our deadline for responses back on the RFP are late September. We've shipped it out to a number of the developers that we've been working with, including some that are here today. Others, we shipped it out to the BATSI Group, the Builders Association of the Twin Cities, and our local Rochester area builders, to the development community that we have here. And we have been contacted, or I've been contacted at least already, by several developers who are at least looking into it, so that's rather encouraging. And then we're also working with the Hilton folks on starting on the condo portion of the ramp in terms of getting the document preparation, the condo declarations, and some of that prepared. The final condoing of the ramp won't happen until, that lowest level gets built, because that's what's going to get conveyed to the Hilton developer for their ownership, and then the city would maintain ownership of the remainder of the ramp. But of course, there's all those various common elements in the ramp that have to be dealt with as part of that condo declaration. So based on the plans for the ramp, our attorneys and their attorneys are already working on the prep of that, so that we don't kind of end up, at the last moment having to scramble to get that element of the project completed.
Okay.
All right.
Questions? Good.
Last project is our lattice project.
So as a reminder, this is a 347 unit apartment building adjacent to St. Mary's Hospital. It continues to progress. The developer is undergoing property acquisition. It's partially complete. They continue to acquire and close on properties. Schematic design work is complete. Design development is about 50% complete. Excavation is expected to begin October of 2017. Financing is expected to close mid-September.
Okay, good. Thank you. So why don't we move on to public, any questions, anyone? Okay, good. Public realm update.
So we want to invite our colleagues to the table to share the update on the Heart of the City Public Realm Project. Thank you for being here. Just a couple of notes on that. If you recall, our mayor, Mayor Brady, is leading a committee that's helping us work through this public realm work for Heart of the City. It's been an excellent group, really guiding this direction. I think our team has done a great job. You asked us last time to come back with some phasing and some cost information, which they will share with you as well. And this project has been through a lot of public input, quite a few community sessions, which you'll hear about in the presentation, and has, again, one of those examples of a project that has truly evolved as they're starting to hear the input from the various stakeholders. You can imagine the Heart of the City, the design area, it has a lot of stakeholders and a lot of voices behind it. So it's been, the mayor might want to comment on this as well, but I think it's been very positive in terms of the movement forward.
Well, I'll just make a quick comment at the beginning, is obviously in this area is the Chateau Theater, which is the, the heart of the city. And I keep pointing out, I shouldn't say keep, but we don't want to do anything that detracts from that building and what we will hopefully accomplish with the Chateau. We're still working on that. There's, on both sides of the building, there's issues with other either new owners of a building or other construction that's going to take place, and how does that impact the Chateau itself. Totally an aside, in about 3 weeks, I think it is, I go down to New Orleans for one of our U.S. Conference of Mayors meetings. The Orpheum Theater there has that kind of a movable floor that I just talked to them the other day, and how flexible the flexibility it gives them for functions at noontime, evening time. It can be totally different because the floor can be either flat or raked and all of that. So I'm looking forward to going over there and having a little meeting and show and tell that they're going to give me to see how that works. But heart of the city is critical. We've also discovered that there's a subway that goes underneath part of that, and some of that affects the financing that the Kaler Hotel people have and what you can and can't do. There's happens to be a fountain that's in there that's the Peace Fountain, and it was a local sculptor that did all of that. And I've talked to John a couple of times and said too, we don't want to, if it has to be moved, we don't want it to look like it's just being pushed away because it doesn't fit in what is the Peace Plaza, and so that whole thing. So anyway, it's been a good working relationship. A lot of input from the public, as Lisa has said, and I think we're progressing. And I would also say that both Shane and John have been very receptive to some of the comments that have come in, notably one of them, the Stairway to Nowhere.
Is it, Mayor, is it based on what you've reported, is it fair to say that you referred to on both sides of the Chateau Theater, that it's your wish that we complete the total plan for Discovery and how everything fits in before we proceed with any part of it?
Even though there's some of us that are frustrated, we want to move faster, but that is key, I think, to go ahead and do something and then find out 4 months later or 6 months later that, if we'd have known we could have gotten that, we could have done something different. And so, and it primarily is kind of affecting the Chateau, I think, too. But it's, I'm one that says, let's get this thing done. But it reminds me of...
an overall plan is what you're saying.
Right, yes. Too often, RT will know this, that sometimes we tear up a street and then it comes a month later or 2 months later, we got to do it again, and people say, isn't anybody thinking about that? So yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reintroduce John Buggy with RSP and Shane Cohen with Cohen and Partners. They've been providing leadership on this project to give you the update.
And could I just say before they start that we're not asking you for any action today. This is a presentation for information only. So,
Terrific.
With that in mind.
Yeah. Chair Ryback and members of the board, I'm John Buggy with RSP Architects, and this is Shane Cohen from Cohen and Partners. We're wrapping up schematic design, and it's important to know that that means it's not all done, it's not all finished, but we have truly, we believe, advanced what the appropriate vision is for the heart of the city public realm design. In our little presentation here, I'm going to do just a little bit about public realm design, set context a little bit about kind of why investment in public realm is important. That'll be brief. And then we're going to get into the work that we've done. Shane will walk through the design. I'll walk through the quality and capital cost conversation that we've had. We've done some work on operations and maintenance too, looking ahead. We're not just designing a lovely place, we're trying to help you think through, and the stakeholders think through, boy, what are the costs of this to operate and maintain it, okay, and to program it. And then we've got an implementation strategy schedule for you to consider as well too. So we believe we're at a really good point to provide you with a lot of information at EDA to make some really smart decisions about next steps, okay? Why invest in public realm? Signature downtown spaces, and cities across America are proving it. Really elevate a city's brand. They encourage out-of-town visitors. It's not stated here, but those visitors stay longer, they spend money, but also residents go to their downtown more when visitors are there. So this is definitely about the brand of Rochester as world-class destination. It's for the visitors, it's also for the residents. Previous underused public spaces can become destinations for residents. We believe Peace Plaza as it is today is underused. And the alleyway that we've talked about in previous, completely underused. So we're trying to leverage the assets of the heart of the city as best as possible to really create a vibrant world-class destination. And really important to that too, it's not just the physical space, it's the programming that takes place or needs to take place for those places to really thrive and grow and attract more businesses. In the end, we believe this investment is also part of the workforce challenge and the workforce opportunity that Rochester has before it. There are a lot of different thoughts about the level of private investment that comes with public investment. The most commonly quoted at all of the conferences we go to about urban design is expect a return on capital in the 200 to 300%. A lot of money comes in when public infrastructure is improved. There was a shot, obviously, of the High Line, and that's a phenomenal example of an infrastructure project that's brought a lot of economic vitality to New York City.
Chair Ryback and the board, I just want to say that I'm completely honored to be here and have been working on this project all the way through and getting to know the community and collaborating with everybody. So it's great to be here. We've crafted a mission statement, not right away, after we got through our process of really speaking to a lot of people within the community, and it was to create a vibrant, world-class urban downtown that is uniquely Rochester, to attract residents and visitors to the heart of the city and a place that celebrates life, community, health, and wellness 365 days a year, which is key, especially in our climate, right? In all of the work that we did, we boiled it down to this. In any diagram I show you today, Gonda is going to be on the left, University Square is on the right, 2nd Street is at the bottom, Center Street is at the top. Is that when we interviewed the patients and the people that visit Mayo for procedures, they asked for a more contemplative environment. They wanted to go outside, but they wanted a space to contemplate in and to be quiet in, and then to move beyond that into a more active zone. The city of Rochester, which this is the main point that we heard from all the residents, is we want to be invited in and we want it to be active and vibrant like you see here on Thursdays on First, but we want that all the time. We want an active, vibrant downtown realm. And so our diagram quickly became Peace Plaza as the engaging heart of the heart, and 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue and the alley as these arteries that invite people and pull people up and welcome them to Peace Plaza. So we've created 5 initiatives, and we'll walk through each one with before and after pictures. Again, Gonda's on your upper left here, and the initiatives are 2nd Avenue, which is also known as Annenberg Plaza, 1st Avenue and the alley associated with it next to the University Square building, the Market Plaza or Peace Plaza, Theater Square, which is an extension of Peace Plaza, and then world-class art that we'll talk about. My first project was in St. Mary's Hospital, the St. Francis Peace Garden, almost 25 years ago. And so to come back here and start to study the public realm was a real treat for me. And the first time I came to Annenberg Plaza, I thought, well, all this research about wellness and places for people to contemplate and be right outside of these incredible buildings, Mayo, Gonda, Plummer, Siebens, and yet it doesn't really invite anybody and give context for a place to really sit and connect with people. And so our vision was to create a piece of art in front of Gonda that you saw in the distance, but take that centerpiece that is really unusable right now and create this amazing environment for people to be connected to Rochester. So use all native plants that are inspired by the Zumbro River Valley, have the circulation on the side as it exists today, but all these places to go in and sit and connect with nature and people. So second is really about contemplation and the movements on the side. A view that many of us have seen in what I believe to be one of the most civic buildings in all of Rochester is up high in the Gonda building looking down at Peace Plaza. The first time I stood up there and really studied Peace Plaza, we as a team said, what's a traffic circle doing in the middle of Peace Plaza? And it's very much disconnecting this beautiful civic building to Peace Plaza. And so our first vision was to take the quality of Gonda and just lay it down. Take that and just lay it down over Peace Plaza and invite people out. And so the vision here has been a building of a process that takes the small little lower level when you come out of the basement level of Gonda and really push it out so that anybody that's in that corridor that's the most well-traveled corridor is invited outside. They could go upstairs through a new grand set of stairs or through a new elevator that's an art installation, or they can travel and experience an art installation by James Turrell, who I believe is one of the great artists, environmental artists alive today in the public realm, which is to create an art installation that's about sky, and it brings people together like something I've never seen in public art as well. And then this quality of the Gonda building extends down Peace Plaza. There's lots of places to sit. There's lots of retail, and you really open up the Skyway system and the Kaler building for a vibrant retail. Now you move over to First Avenue, and the first time I measured this, it sounds geeky, but I got super excited about the width of the street because there's a lot of room here. And I've worked on streets all over the world, and I thought, it'd be very easy to make this a really welcoming street that's about people and not only about cars. And so we worked with our engineer team and our economic team, and all the stakeholders, and ultimately we concluded on a street that would stay open to traffic, that would be 24 feet wide in the middle, and it would be paved the same as the plazas on the side, so it could be closed off for events and turn into this incredible public realm. We'd get rid of all the curbs and have it be the first curbless street in Minnesota. There's a lot of initiatives like this, but we would be leading the way here. And we would create a sustainable street that was about people and wellness and health, and that you would move up and down, and the cars would function there as well, which was ultimately ended up being a very strong recommendation from our economic team. Keep the cars by, and then keep the parking on the north side. The alleys from Patrick Sieb did this incredible prototyping festival, and we ended up collaborating with 4 artists from Minnesota that were really amazing. Sean had an idea on how to take the alley, which is a very underutilized space in many cities today, and use projection as a way to tell stories to the community about what's happening in Rochester. So any event that's happening would be projected up here. You could actually take an event like this today and project it out there, or any events, and turn this, without a large investment, into a really active space. We're now standing next to the Kaler building, and the way that Peace Plaza functions today, the quality of the materials on it is very different than the quality of the materials on the Gonda, right? Gonda is a world-class building, and so to create a world-class destination, we need to be thinking about the outside the same as the end, and reorganizing the way that people move so that the storefronts really open up and become active. So what we did is we took the material of the Gonda building and just laid it down as the centerpiece. And it's 75-foot wide plaza, so you have a 25-foot band in the middle for an activity zone of pop-up retail, benches, plantings. You can get trees to grow in here, but there's tunnels underneath, so they need to be on planters. And so you make the best use of those and create benches with those as well. And then you have 25 feet on both sides for people to move, and I think the quality of the retail that will continue to happen in this space over years will continue to go up and up and up. So it's very important. The skyways, think of how many different skyways we have in Minnesota and how many initiatives there are to get people outside of them. We believe it's really important here because there's a level of activity and vibrancy that happens in the skyway level as well as the subway level. And we need to bring people up from the subways and down from the skyways. And we're not having a stair connection here, but we are saying let's go outside of the skyway. Let's have doors that go outside and activate it with a place to sit, a place to have lunch, and a place to look down below. And so that the second level is activated and the street level is activated. And you begin to get this dialogue back and forth that encourages people to walk outside and breathe the air and connect with people. Now we're standing on First Street. Again, you'll see how the way that Peace Plaza is designed right now, you have about 10 feet on the side, so it doesn't feel real inviting for the retail with all the movement happening in the center. By taking all the activity and concentrating it in the center, you end up with these cafes and places to sit and pop-up retail in the center, and you still have these wide 25-foot walkways on both sides, which is about twice as wide as Nicollet Mall provided for in their new design. They have about 12 feet wide. So we really have generous pedestrian corridors on both sides, and we're really, as you can see from Lasker Jeweler, opening up the retail in a whole new way that hopefully gets people really excited about the retail opportunities there. This is a view from Theater Square, which really is an extension of Peace Plaza. And this is actually an area, when you study the subway systems, where there's a lot of room for trees that we can plant here and really bring in the green and the life. So Theater Square really wants to be, when we think of Theater Square, we don't ever think of it independent of the Chateau Theater. We think of it as the same. The Theater Square and Peace Plaza has to give energy to Chateau Theater, and Chateau Theater has to give energy to Peace Plaza. And they work in harmony together. In a lot of ways, we wonder why they're not a singular project. So this is just an image showing how it's an extension of Peace Plaza, but yet there's some definition to Theater Square where it can get programmed off. This is the fountain the Peace Fountain that the mayor just talked about, and this is a view standing at University Square. Ultimately, we would like to find this a really beautiful home, and the idea for Peace Plaza, which is evolving because there was more feedback in Theater Square late in the game than there was the rest of the plaza, is that it's an interactive space. That you can, when you get to this side of Peace Plaza, it turns into a place for families together, and that could be one day, so you program it and you turn on a scrim of water that's a half-inch deep, and kids and families are playing there, and then you can drain that and set up a stage and have a performance. And so the idea of flexible performance here as a complement to Chateau Theater is what everybody does agree on, this vibrant place. And the stairs that the mayor mentioned is there, which haven't been well received. Think of them as supersized benches, whether they went there or anywhere, meet you at the stairs or meet you at the bench. And we'll continue to play in the next phase with where a stage would go and is there seating, additional seating or not, but the whole idea of this kind of vibrant interaction. Our economic team was very firm in the type of art that you need to create a world-class destination needs to be world-class art. And so we've looked at two artists, the first two possible artists for an object that would hang in the sky here at First and First. One is Janet Eckelman and the other one is Lozano Hemmer, Raphael Lozano Hemmer. Both were agreeable to collaborate with a local artist, which was a game changer for us. To bring somebody in that would actually inspire a career here and create an interactive piece of art that would attract people to this end of Peace Plaza. And then James Terrell, who doesn't have a lot of these left in his life, and when I called and spoke to his agent about Mayo and Rochester and the mission, he said, I want to do it. I want to do it because it'll bring patients and the community together. And so we have an opportunity to go visit his space and then some of his projects in the next phase. This is Rice University, and it's the only art installation I've ever seen where the community comes together at sunset and sundown and sits peacefully. So it's really kind of fantastic. This is just, again, the prototyping artist that we selected to work with, and we want to say that in this next phase of work, it's important to keep the community active with what's happening. And so we would propose to continue to do prototyping festivals, to do demonstrations in Peace Plaza, in First and Second, that the community could interact with, and as demonstrations. And then finally, the principles that the economic team continued to come back to is this is a 365 plaza, which means it needs to work winter and summer. And in order to do that, you need world-class art, diverse retail, and flexible programming. So the year-round use in the best winter examples you'll see in Montreal and Toronto are about programming. These are about a city getting super active and having events year-round. Now, we do have snow melt throughout the entire cost estimate, so not only for safety, but recognizing that we want this to be an active space in the winter as well. We have lots of space for activating retail, pop-up retail that will happen, and we expect the retail in the surrounding areas to continue to become more active. And the space has been designed to be completely flexible for all sorts of events and programming that will happen.
And I'm going to briefly cover costs and the next steps. So as we put together our costs for this, we thought a lot about quality, about craft, and about legacy, and not about how cheap can we do it, but how do we do it right? And as Shane talked about, bringing some of the quality of the Gonda building into this, as well as how projects like Millennium Park and the 9/11 Memorial have been done. So wanting to make sure there's a quality project. We have prepared a detailed cost breakdown for each of the initiatives of the project. We feel that'll be most workable and helpful for the team as it goes forward. It summarizes to this, of a price tag of north of $46 million, which is a lot, we understand that. It does include contingencies, both contractor and construction contingencies, again, broken down by each section. And just so you know, we have, like I said, a very detailed summary of the cost component. So there's a lot of information and detail prepared for informing you and the EDA, as well as next steps on the project. Yeah, Shane just asked me about square foot costs. So we have also summarized the construction work in terms of a square foot cost. And Cincinnati, some of you may know Fountain Square in Cincinnati. They were at north of $275 per square foot for their plaza area. And so there are other projects that are similar that are more expensive than this, as well as there are projects that are less expensive than this. So we feel we're in a smart place in terms of a schematic design estimate.
Yeah, the only other 2 points is we worked on Nicollet Mall, which is essentially the same budget. Another great plaza that just got created about public realm is Dilworth Plaza in Philadelphia, which is around $475 a square foot. And so we've continued to test these against projects of quality throughout the country that have been targeted to really create economic growth and at great public realm. And we're right in that zone per square foot cost.
In addition to that, we looked at operations and maintenance costs. So our economics team looked at what's the potential annual earned income for the space, contributed income, value capture, and there is a gap there too. So there is currently projected some funding, public funding that would meet it to take care of the operations and maintenance costs. There are a couple recommendations we'd like to make in terms of governance. Maintenance, the Parks and Rec of City of Rochester does a great job with maintenance of that space right now, and we think they should continue to do that. And in terms of operations and programming, RDA does a fantastic job in Rochester, but they would not have the resources to do the type of programming that's really needed for this. So we recommend they stay involved, but expand the commitment and resources available to them. One other recommendation worth noting from the design team is that you do this as one project. It would be phased, of course. There'll be phasing of the work in order to accommodate all the businesses and the potential disruption and how to tie it into other projects. But there'll be cost efficiency with bidding it out as one project. And we think you're going to get more, let's say, bang for the buck with the brand of Heart of the City if you do it all at once. And we've put together a schedule as well. I want to just call out a few points here. We're completing our schematic design right here. There is, the end of this year, confirmation about what is appropriate in terms of what you want to advance and should advance. So validating scope, schedule, and budget. There's a lot of work in terms of governance and operations and leadership that'll be required. Projects like this require very clear leadership who can get the job done. And also, this is a time to tour and to do some prototyping and testing as well. The thought being, if those things were taken care of and you're ready to launch design, really design development could happen next year. Construction documents could happen in the year 2019. Construction could start late 2019 or so, and I think it's at least about an 18-month process for construction, and that gets you online kind of in the 2021, 2022 range. The dollar signs here are more about the spend. You know, it's less dollars in the beginning for the getting it figured out and having design teams work. The capital starts rolling in 2019 through 2021. Okay, so we think this is hopefully useful for the EDA in your decision making about next steps. So with that, I think we are done.
Okay, why don't we open it up for questions, comments? All right.
Looks good.
I would agree. It also looks good. A couple of questions. One is that one thing I just want to call out is I think you've over-delivered on my expectations for second and a little under on first.
Oh, really?
But I mean, I think overall, I'm very, very pleased with this. Second, I frankly think you've created more of a place than I at least had in my head.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I also want to call out, I think you've addressed the subway issue, which is a really complicated issue here. The Skyway issue, I get where you're going with going outside on the Skyway. That makes a lot of sense. Just a question, why not consider any connection between them?
We had a stair connection on Peace Plaza, which we really liked, and the easement, it's complicated, but there is, as the mayor referenced, there is actually an easement restricting what we can do on Peace Plaza that the Kaler holds.
Right.
And so there was a back and forth negotiation on what we could do. We actually wanted to bring the subway up there as well. Now, that could happen in the future, sometime in the future, which would be a positive.
So the Kaler considers a $47 million investment a nuisance and not something that they could play ball with? Or that's a rhetorical question.
I would like to comment on that.
Yeah.
The ownership group of the Kaler is very, very supportive of this, and the description that Shane just described and the connections you've been talking about, they are a little bit handcuffed in terms of how their financing is structured.
Yeah,
so it isn't about the Kaler's interest. They are very interested and have been very supportive of all of these moves and are trying to work with limitations that they are faced with.
That's the kind of jerky thing somebody can say when they hop in the car and drive back to Minneapolis. So you guys have to deal with it. But I do think, one of these things that is complicated. I would also say, one of the things that I just think is an increased opportunity is there's the discussion of pop-up retail and lots of things, but I don't see yet much engagement from the buildings. The Kaler would be an example. I would like to think that they would see this and would really reorient how their restaurants are. And I know that's not your job, but it is part of this public-private discussion. And on this circulation up and down, that can be solved really easily if one building that's built on this understands the importance of tying that together. So, it's part of a larger dynamic, but this looks to be very much in isolation of any private participation, and I know that won't ultimately be the case, but what's the state of that conversation?
Well, again, the flexible retail, which is really one of the three components of a 365 Plaza. Now, it's also, by the way, one of the program elements that we had in the Stairs to Nowhere was a retail space underneath that function, could be ice cream, could be tickets, could be both. But the real truth is that the economic team believes, and we've seen in many, many cases, with the right investment in the public realm here, all that retail changes. I mean, you're absolutely right. We're showing the same retail in there today in our renderings because it's not within our scope. But the level and quality of retail, both on First and on Peace Plaza, will continue to change over time with this investment.
Yeah.
And the second level, too.
If I can just add a little bit, Mayor, too, which is, as we've come to a place of, I'll say, kind of the schematic design settling down, more people are starting to call. So the stakeholders and adjacent building owners are contacting us now. Tell us more. Okay, we understand where it's at. So I think there's something important about, you considering advancing this so that the other investment and the other considerations can begin to become more real. But I can say that's happened as well. Mayo has been very participatory, and they're a big stakeholder, an adjacent stakeholder here, and Kaler has as well. They've been really terrific in terms of providing input and support. I think the next step is where, hopefully we'll see more movement and engagement with the adjacent properties.
So Mayo controls the place that would be the subterranean, the subway level.
Right.
On the far west end.
On the Gonda side,
Okay,
yeah.
so that's not something, that's just a discussion with you guys in Mayo.
Well, we've been meeting with Mayo regularly,
Right.
Got it.
regularly
Yep.
on that and the
Okay.
vision, yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. I think just as you go on, I'm certain the four of you are talking quite a bit, but just to the ability of us to use our influence if projects come before here and ask for participation or anything else, I do think we should reinforce the issue that something pretty substantial is happening here and that the private response is great. And I think, even if we had flexibility that responded to what somebody was doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, folks?
Well, I'd just say that now's the time to be aspirational.
Yeah.
And you've done it. It feels very, very good in that regard. I love the fact that you've captured the importance of the quality of Gonda. For those of us that sit up there waiting for appointments and gazing out of those upper floors, I mean, that is the view of the city. And for you to take that building and the quality that's there and lay it down, I think is really terrific. So don't let that go, and let's keep that as an important priority. And just a couple other thoughts. I'd love to sit at Chester's outside and look down the alley.
Yes.
And then I walk up and down the alley, and I explained to my wife a couple weeks ago that this is going to be really a highlight of Rochester. She looked at me like I was a little kooky. I'm really happy that alley is a piece of this, because that can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And lastly, when you look at the property that adjoins, the properties that adjoin this and are adjacent to it, there aren't that many private landowners.
Right.
I mean, Mayo controls a good part of it, and the Kaler's a big piece of it, but then you look at what else is left, there's kind of a handful.
Right.
And so I think it's really important that you all be in really intense dialogue with them of what the dream is here, and that they have a critical role in helping us get this done.
They do.
Agreed. Thanks. Yeah.
Other thoughts? Two other quick ones. The point you made quickly, but I want to underscore, is this idea about doing it all at once. It would be
Yeah.
tempting to say, let's do this over the next 10 years. These projects cause dislocation. Let would hope there would be somewhat less than a certain project in a city that I know that's
Right.
undergoing that right now.
We know what you're talking about.
But it can be done much better than that. So,
Yes.
I think that's a terrifically important point.
It is really worth mentioning, not only does it set the brand and the tone for all the other projects in DMC, with the construction phasing, we can sequence it in a way it's much less disruptive when we're thinking about the whole piece of it at once. And so we'll save money, we'll be more strategic with the phasing, absolutely.
Other thoughts? Okay, well, this is really exciting. It's a big gulp, but it's a big idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Amen.
thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, so we're moving to St. Mary's Place. Have we done in time? We're up in line, okay.
So, Mr. Chair, these reports will only take.
I'm sorry, I skipped the Chateau Theater.
Yeah, no, that's
Bad
fine.
idea.
These reports will only take a moment. There has been conversation already about Chateau, about the idea of integrating the work of Chateau with Heart of the City, and moreover, the concept of linking it to other developments. Since our last meeting, city staff have been working on governance and operating and business plan for operating Chateau. There's still work to be done on that. There is substantial conversation and collaboration going on with adjacent property owners, the owners and future developers of the Michael site, and the adjacent Wells Fargo building, which has been and is being transacted for is for sale, and there's a transaction sort of underway, and so It's been a bit of radio silence as they're doing their due diligence process, so we haven't been in a position that we'd like to work with them, but we will. And that's going to be an important part of the Chateau redevelopment. The task force, there is a task force that the mayor chairs that will reconvene, and there have been some interim uses of the Chateau from time to time, events and so forth that continue to give it exposure and to begin to sort of reintroduce it to the community, and we expect that there could be more of that. So I think there isn't anything further necessarily to report on the Chateau other than to say that that will be part of this larger discussion that you've asked for.
Just one thing, just as that comes forward, just, there's been a lot of discussion about the theater here, et cetera, et cetera. Just at some point, I'd love to have us figure out what's the joint, what's the connection between these, and what's a programming overlap between them, because Chateau's not in a vacuum.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm a broken record on this one, but I just think that we need to continue to look at the heart of the city and the totality, that the Chateau is a piece of this much larger development project. And I do think you should really work hard at trying to find some interim uses for the Chateau, just so it doesn't go dark, that are not expensive. And so I'm not sure whether that's a priority or not, but I think it should be.
Thank you.
Okay. St. Mary's.
Again, this is not a formal report today, just to let you know that we continue our work with the final sort of concept design level for the St. Mary's Place. You recall this is the Second Street corridor adjacent to St. Mary's Hospital. There are upcoming community and city council presentations. There are some who are attempting, doing some prototyping, testing out some ideas in that area. So we'll be coming back to you in November with a more complete report on suggested next steps and potential sequencing.
Okay. Just go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all
Okay.
I'm prepared to say. I'm prepared to respond to any questions, but we
Just
didn't
one
have a
quick
more
question
formal
on,
report.
or comment, I guess, on St. Mary's Place and what we just saw with Heart of the City and what's been called City Loop, which I think I'd love a name that's a little more reflective of it not being a loop. But in any case, these are all really exciting projects, but they're really part of the same whole about what is my experience coming to town, how do I move around town. There's always this wayfinding discussion, which is usually interpreted to be a sign. What I think is increasingly being done is pavement treatments that tell me follow the yellow brick road or however I get to a certain place, how landscape is used to tie together. And I know you're doing this, but I just want to underline how important I think it is for us to think there's a way that you can move around this town. And I just think Kotzky Park and the water feature, the creek that comes close to downtown, is just a few blocks from here, but I don't have a clue. I've come to Rochester for years and years and years, and I never knew Kotzky Park and that creek was there. I'm really embarrassed to say that. But it's important to say that because you see that when you see where the river is. Somehow all of this ties together really easily, and we're not only building places, we're building connectors. So I just wanted to, I know you know that.
Well, I think it's a good point, and one new group we've put together is an experience group to really start to talk about that and many other things about the experience. Now that we're moving forward in implementation with projects, then it becomes about programming and trying to align the experience with patients and community members.
Yeah.
So I think you're spot on, and wayfinding always comes up.
Good, okay. Should we move the EDA report?
Yep. So, members of the board, thank you very much. I'm going to introduce Kevin. Where is Kevin? Kevin Bright one more time. Also, two quick things. We have two more reports. One is just an update. We keep the marketing statistics in front of you because we want to keep you invested and understanding of the lift that we're doing on the marketing front. On page 113 is your marketing report. remember, we're just 2 months into our first campaign for marketing of DMC, and the arrows are going in the right direction. A couple of things to remind you. The objectives, of course, right now, we're trying to gain national attention. I mean, we've done local and statewide attention getting for the last couple of years, and now we've got to move this thing to the national stage, if you will. We need to demonstrate momentum. We're driving traffic to DMC.MN right now, and you'll see that with the statistics. And then what we're also doing is doing targeted marketing. So life science is really very important for us, as well as investors and developers. So we're starting to do some target marketing. We're now analyzing it, and next year we'll even be smarter as we start to move forward on all of this analysis. Couple of things in what we've seen in the first 2 quarters is this last month, June was the highest web traffic month that we've had, and I believe there were a couple of reasons for this. One, we introduced, I think you all know that video is the way to capture attention on the web. We've introduced a whole series of videos so that not only is the EDA, DMC City talking about Rochester, but it's the people that are doing this stuff here in this community. And that has captured some great audience and attention. And also, if you recall, we were in San Diego. And so for the first time, our web statistics are showing for the very first time, Rochester audience wasn't the #1 hits on our website, San Diego is. So it just talks about the power of our marketing and our presence in these particular areas of focus and targeted areas, and what it really does for awareness and driving to our website. What we're doing on our end, on the EDA front, is we're closing the loop on all of these. So our San Diego visits, for example, we had a lot of meet and greets, and we're closing the loop to see how many of those can really, I guess, justify coming here and doing that next visit and that next targeted approach. So I think it's been pretty powerful on our front. Another thing I just wanted to remind everybody, a few other things that we're doing. Blogs are interesting. People like blogs on a website. And that's the #1 hit, as well as the developer site for our maps. So people are looking, they want to see what's going on here, what are the projects, and what are the blogs. And the blogs, again, relate back to the video portion of telling stories. People are really interested in hearing who's coming to Rochester, why are they coming, what are they building, what's the new project they're doing, what new companies are happening. And for us to tell it, it's one thing, but to get the real people telling the stories is another. It's been a very powerful tool for us. We also are on the national landscape, as you know. We're in NPR, we're in Delta Sky magazine, so people are starting to follow up on the website, and we're starting to track that to see what kind of progress is happening, and should we be investing in those next year, or do we do some other targeted approaches? We just got our first analysis done for the first 2 quarters of our marketing plan in terms of the targeted activity that we're doing, so I'll bring that report next time once we analyze it and see how we're doing. The final thing I just wanted to talk about that it is time intensive, labor intensive, but most effective for us, of course, is the relationship marketing. I mean, this is all about building relationships with people, meeting with people, helping them understand what's going on in Rochester. And just in the last quarter, we've had 53 meetings with private investors and developers. So people are interested, and they're coming in our office, and we're talking. We meet with the city staff as well, so that we can all help people understand what that means. We also have visited with 5 international groups in the last quarter. So we've captured the international attendance or audience as well. So they're wondering what can be developed, what's the interest, what's going on in Rochester, and how can we be part of that. And then we're doing presentations, of course, every time we turn around. So I believe that our marketing, although it's still early, we just finished Q2, I believe that the statistics are helping us show that the work that we're doing is moving in the right direction. And as we get smarter with this and decide what publications we should be in, where it makes sense for us to be, what about conferences? Should we be there? Should we geofence? Should we target it in different marketing arms? It's going to pay off for us. We can't let off the gas on this one. We're trying to drive a brand, and it's a new brand to the market. And frankly, we're helping Minnesota, I believe, because we hear oftentimes that Minnesota is not the first place people think of, particularly with life science. So we're really helping our colleagues from Medical Alley, DEED, and others we're partnering on a lot of things now that's been very helpful on the marketing front.
Any comments? Just a quick thing, I'm very happy you mentioned the international one. I've been thinking a lot about the dynamics in international travel right now, especially the Middle East core business. And I just think at some point having that conversation would be interesting. Well, let's move to the energy integration.
So let me introduce Kevin. Kevin Bright has been with us now 5 months. And if you recall, the McKnight Grant has helped us support Kevin in his work. He's working approximately 4 days with the DMC EDA office and 1 day with the city, so it's a new model for us, and it's been working very effectively. Kevin brings a great experience and a breadth of knowledge, and he wanted to give you a sense of where we're at. Remember, his job is to make sure this energy report that we all approved is going to come to fruition. It's a big job, it's lofty, and he's just going to give you an update on that.
We're super happy you're here because some of us, this one in particular, has been too chatty today. We are coming up against some deadlines here, so I think that my ask of you to keeping it tight is only, is not about the lack of interest in the topic.
Sure. So thank you for having me. My name's Kevin Bright. My experience is really sustainability and green building in higher education. So I spent the past 9 years at Harvard University and Colby College and moved here again in March for this position. I just wanted to quickly remind you of the sustainability focus areas that were included in the sustainability plan or the DMC plan. I'm not going to talk through every one of these, but a couple of highlights are the energy goals here. Reduce energy consumption and energy use intensity by 25% below 2010 levels by 2030. So that's across the entire DMC district. We're trying to reduce energy consumption. With every new development that occurs, that's essentially shooting ourselves in the foot because it's adding additional energy consumption that wasn't in the baseline to start with. So we kind of have to attack this from 2 areas. One, reduce energy consumption in existing buildings as much as possible, and then make sure any new construction that's occurring is as energy efficient as it can be. There's a few other areas as well, dealing a lot with resource reduction in the way that people commute to work. So I won't touch on these too much, but just mention the fact that across the district, we're trying to reduce the amount of utility consumption and resource consumption that's occurring, as well as the final one here, reduce greenhouse gas emissions DMC-wide. I wanted to point out in the DMC plan, there are project sustainability goals, and there are some that are specific to energy reduction and mention water performance, but don't have stringent goals tied to that for specific projects. So this is an area that we're going to focus on more moving forward to try to better align the goals for the DMC district that we're trying to realize with the environmental outcomes from the buildings themselves as well. And these are, lessons learned from projects that we've worked through recently. So some next steps that I'll mention are exactly that. What are we focusing on in order to ensure that the new construction that's occurring within the DMC district is aligning with the environmental outcomes that we have in place across the DMC district. So these discussions are in place with the Energy Integration Committee among stakeholders within the city of Rochester and across the state of Minnesota to figure out what's the best way to do this moving forward, set a guidelines or a policy for new construction. This isn't to mention there's a lot of work going on with the city to help reduce their energy consumption, their existing building stock. We have a couple of Environmental Defense Fund interns, which are actually funded by the McKnight Foundation as well. So they're helping us out quite a bit, which is very much appreciated. But really the work with the DMC aligns very closely with what the city of Rochester, their goals are as well. So it's a good position, and that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good. Question? Well, we're just really happy you're here and think, when you go back to those conversations we had about creating this and taking the McKnight Grant and all of that, this is what we wanted, so wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great update, thank you. Okay, so the budget you have in the packet, if there are any questions, Kathleen can answer any of them. Anyone have any questions on the budget background? I'm so happy we have our volunteers. Thank you very much. Your volunteers on top of your volunteering, so it means a lot. Meeting schedule, just we have another transportation work session. That's going to be in late September, early October. We're going to start to just remind people the options are narrowing, so we're getting near some decision points and all of that. So it would be great if people can attend that meeting. And we're going to be scheduling another executive committee meeting November 2nd, I think. Next regular meeting will be then. Okay, that'll be before the, coordinated with the.
December 7th meeting.
Yeah.
November 7th meeting.
Thank you for helping on that. Okay, any other questions, comments? Good. Thank you all very much. Good.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.